Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeology Show, episode 156.
On today's show, we talk about an ancient board game, a Roman market town, and new discoveries at Machu Picchu.
Let's dig a little deeper into the history of board games. That was bad. Let's dig a little deeper, just like the Romans did. Let's dig a little deeper, just like the Romans in England, where they just kept digging and digging and digging.
These are all really bad.
Dig a little deeper into the jungles of Peru. Let's just dig a little deeper.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Today, we are coming at you from Quartzsite, Arizona.
I mean, that's pretty aggressive. I'm not coming at anybody, but when I do that, they bring out pepper spray. But
yes, well, you are a large man, so
yes, indeed. All right. Yes, so we are in the middle of Arizona. Well, not really the middle of the west side of Arizona.
Yep.
Quartzsite, big RVing event here. We went to the show this week.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous COVID Omicron breeding ground.
But for sure.
We were like one of the only people masked.
Yeah.
So
we didn't stay very long, and we tried to stick to the outside spaces for the most part. But yeah, not a lot of people taking it seriously down here.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
The spot that we're actually parked in our RV is like out in the desert. We're just on some BLM land, and you get to stay there for free. So it's been really cool being here. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we have a solar setup we've mentioned before with lithium batteries, which we're doubling in a couple months here to really increase our capabilities out here. Because we've got to manage this pretty closely, and we don't want to manage it as much.
No.
So we're going to double our capacity for intake and storage.
Yeah, being off grid is like just such a freeing feeling. Even though we have to manage our power so closely, it still is so cool to be like completely off grid like this.
Yeah, if you want to hear more stuff like this, check out the Archaeotech podcast, because Paul and I sometimes talk about this stuff quite a bit because, you know, we are traveling workers. We work full time, and pretty much everyone in archaeology that's not at a university also does that.
Right.
You know, so they even people who have full-time jobs in an office in a town somewhere, they often will go on field projects where they are in hotels, camping, you know, they're remote and they come home on the weekends or every 10 days or something like that. So it's pretty common. It's more common than it's not to be away from home and being a nomad. And if you have an RV or want to do this sort of lifestyle, then, you know, that's why we talk about it.
Yeah, archaeology is kind of perfect for it. I mean, we've been on some camping projects where if we'd had an RV like this with solar and everything, it would have been a much more comfortable experience for sure.
You know what else is great to have in an RV?
What?
A couple of great board games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You know who else thought that?
Who? Tell
Ancient
me.
Saudi Arabians.
Wow.
Well, near Saudi Arabia anyway.
Near it. Yeah.
Yes. I guess it says southeast of Saudi Arabia. But anyway, we are going to talk about an article that we saw, and we've got a couple different links in here about this same article. There's a few different places that reported it, and then I went back to actually the press release from the Polish Center of Mediterranean Archaeology at the University of Warsaw, which is where the team is based that actually made the find. And it's pretty cool. It says archaeologists unearth 4,000-year-old stone board game in Oman. That's where this is, not Saudi Arabia. And, you know, the thing is, when you first open the first article that we linked to, I'm like, so I see a rock that has some lines etched in it and some depressions. That's got to be the board game that they're talking about.
Definitely.
But then they've got their scale and their north arrow like on some other rocks. And I'm wondering if they just kind of got those out of the way to keep the quote board game in focus, or what the case is there. I'm not really sure.
I wonder, because you always, before you begin excavating an area, you always sort of like brush it off, clear it off, and take a picture before you actually touch anything that's in the unit that you're about to excavate.
Yeah.
So I wonder if this photo is some kind of like pre-excavation photo, and that's why it's in this kind of like awkward angle where you can see that there's a grid with the holes in it there, but it definitely doesn't seem like it's like the focal point. yet. It's not like museum quality photos of the artifact, basically.
Right. This is a field photo.
Yeah, definitely a field photo.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a pretty good size too. It's a 30 centimeter scale that's in there. So the actual portion of it that they have that's visible, it looks like it's about 25 centimeters across. And maybe 10 centimeters up and down, although it could be partially buried, it looks like.
It could be, yeah.
But, you know, I might see something like this and go, it's definitely artificial. It's definitely something that was made by humans. Whether or not I would know it was a game board would depend largely on my experience.
Yeah, and like the context of the area, and if stuff like this has been found before, or it really takes somebody having seen something like this before to recognize what they're looking at. Because I know I certainly wouldn't have looked at that and gone, game board.
Yeah. There's a game known as the Royal Game of Ur, and it was a 2-player game similar to backgammon, and they think similar to this game, and that was dated to around 4,500 years ago from the city of Ur, which is an ancient Mesopotamian city that we've mentioned on other shows. In fact, Paul Zimmerman, who is my host on the Architect podcast, has been on this show recently talking about that.
Yeah,
so
he talked about that, yeah.
So if you're new to the show, go back a couple episodes and look at the stuff where we're talking about Iraq. We don't necessarily talk about Ur too much in there because it wasn't about that, but he mentions it in passing. But lots of cool stuff that we talked about on those. This was actually found in a structure near the village of, and I'm going to get this wrong, Ain Bini Sidah, AYNBANISAIDAH, however that's pronounced. And yeah, they were excavating and found lots of cool things, and this is just one of them.
Yeah, I think it just shows that this area was much further along in development than was previously thought, because they found things like board games and some of the other artifacts and things that they found too, like the copper production and stuff like that. Yeah, that it just kind of made them rethink the whole society and what was going on there. Because if you get to the point where you have time to make a board game and play a board game, like that's a really thriving society or town that is at that point where they have the time and the energy and the resource availability to do that.
It's just amazing to me to think that people were in cities that had the leisure time to be able to do stuff like this 4,000 years ago. I mean, they were building pyramids just as long ago, but I mean, thinking about societies just thriving. I don't know. In this day and age, it's just our bias of being in the future that you feel like everything prior to like Victorian England was the prehistoric Stone Age.
It was like drudgery.
Yeah.
Drudgery.
No, they were dredging a little bit too. But no, you feel like it's just a bunch of, hunter gatherers.
Yeah.
But it's very much not true. Not that there's anything wrong with hunter gathering.
No. But these groups of people had really developed really sophisticated societies, and it seems silly that a board game would be evidence of that, but it totally is. And I'm looking at the picture of this game, and do you know what it totally reminds me of? Mancala.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the game where you've got like a grid with 2 rows and the little cups, and you move your colored beans or stones or whatever you have. Marbles, yeah. And I can't actually remember how you win or lose or whatever, but I know that you're moving your beads from one glass to another.
Yeah, you're moving your groups of them based on how many's in there.
Yeah, like you count out one at a time around, and
I think you've got to get so many in before you can move them on.
Yeah, but that's what that to give you like an image in your mind if you can't go to the link right now. But that's what this board game grid setup looks like to me.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. It's a little shallow, though, so I'm wondering what it would have been used for, if it could have been used for, like, they said backgammon-like game for the City of Ur game, but the Royal Game of Ur, but I'm not really sure how to play backgammon. I know it's played with, checkers-looking pieces on, like little triangles and stuff, but I'm not really sure how to play that. So things I like to see about this, though, is what this really means, and, I mean, it just means that they had the time and the leisure ability to make something like this and to sit down and play a game, probably with a nice fermented beverage and, and have a good time. And board games are still like one of the most fascinating things. I don't think board games will ever truly go away. They may become virtual or something like that, but the idea of moving things around on a board and doing stuff, I mean, people have been playing games like that for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's just really cool. And there's a story from Jerusalem in one of these articles where they think this is what happened, but bored Roman soldiers carved a grid for a checkers-like game into the steps of the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem around 1800 years ago.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, they're just sitting there like, when are we going to go?
Yeah.
What I really take out of that story is the military hasn't changed in 1800 years. It's like
soldiers still get bored.
Hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
Line up, and then we all just end up sitting around and then etching into the Damascus Gate.
Uh-huh. And you are speaking from experience here.
Yes. Yes. I don't know how many times I've been rushed to get to a location and do stuff, and then you sit for 18 hours just waiting for something else to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but at least you're ready. I guess that's the point.
Yes, totally ready.
Yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned the copper production. They found evidence of that also at this site, which dates parts of it at least to 3200 to 1200 BCE, which they're playing with dates around here because this says 4,000-year-old board game, but then this says 3,200, which would be 5,200 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the range, 3,200 to 1,200 BCE. So the game is from somewhere in that range.
In the middle of that, yeah. But copper production 5,200 years ago?
Yeah.
5,000 years ago?
That is a long time ago.
I mean, that's awesome. Yeah.
Copper production. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So anyway, that is pretty cool. We have, as I mentioned, at least 3 different links for that one, and it's just a really neat thing. Now from there, we're going to go over to more Romans because I feel like there was another podcast I used to listen to that doesn't really produce anymore that was a news show, and they always had their obligatory Stonehenge news story because there's always something about Stonehenge. Well, it seems lately
it's
like
Rome.
there's always something that includes Romans, and sometimes that also involves the HS2 dig, which we mentioned last week, something else that was uncovered, again, Roman-based. So go check that episode out. But we've got another cool Roman find, this time a market, found on the HS2 dig in the UK. Back in a minute.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals. That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 156. And as promised, we're going over to the HS2 dig, which, if you are a regular listener to the show, you know that is a high-speed railway between London and Birmingham in the UK, the United Kingdom. HS2 is, I don't know, the project designation, or like they name highways that way. I don't know if they name railroads that way. I'm not sure what's
I'm
going
not really
on
sure where the 2 comes from, but the gist
Where's
of it is
HS1?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's basically a huge project. And there is so much archaeology that they're uncovering, and it sounds like they know where all these like ancient sites are, because there's a lot of stuff on the surface, but it sounds like they just can't avoid a lot of it, and that's why they have to go through so much excavation just to be able to build this railway. So
this particular find is what they're calling a Roman market town. Mm-hmm. Now that in itself is astounding to me. Like, it's an entire town? That's what you're telling me you found? Yeah. Like, that was unknown. It's just been sitting under someone's farm, where now there's a train going to be, by the way, but it's been sitting under someone's farm, and it's a town that's been there. Yeah. It's like how many things is under the ground.
That's the thing, is I don't think it was unknown. That's why that's what I'm saying, where I think that they had a route that they had to take with this railway, and it just means excavating things that are known and have been known throughout history. And this is just one of them that happens to be in the way, and they have to excavate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Roman market town, it was found in South Northamptonshire.
I mentioned this in the last show.
I know the names.
South Northamptonshire.
Sure, that's fine.
I mean, I guess there's a North Northamptonshire and an East Northamptonshire.
Probably, because, cardinal directions.
Yeah.
And the site itself is called Black Grounds because of the super dark, nearly black soil that they are excavating through in order to uncover the town.
Catholic priests get to name themselves, right? Like the Pope does? Do they all get to do that, or is it just the Pope?
I think it's just the Pope.
Oh,
yeah, like cardinals and stuff don't have a special name.
Because I would be cardinal directions.
Oh my God, you're such a nerd. Why didn't I see that coming?
I don't know.
Oh my God, 15 years. You'd think I would see these coming, but nope.
That's going to be my rapper name too.
Oh my God, you're
Cardinal
such a nerd.
Directions.
Anyway, back to the archaeology, cardinal directions. So they do know that this town began as an Iron Age village around approximately 400 BCE.
That's so long ago.
It is. It's, 2,400, 2,500-ish years ago, right?
Yeah.
And they know this because they found at least 30 roundhouses that date to that period. And I believe, and you might be able to fill in here, but I believe roundhouse is the name for the main structure type that people of that time period lived in.
Yes, only Iron Age savages made their houses round. It wasn't until we started making houses square that real progress began.
I would love to have a roundhouse. It sounds way more interesting. Angles. Who needs angles?
Our house has rounds. It has 6 of them. But
those are wheels.
We're mostly square.
Kind of different.
We're literally in a box right now. Yeah.
So what they're postulating happened with this Iron Age town is that over time, it became sort of a trading post, which brought more prosperity to the area, and it basically grew into a larger town. And sort of at the same time, the Roman influence was growing in the area, and it kind of became, Romanized, basically. And by the early part of the millennia, it was basically a Roman trading town because there was enough Roman influence over it and people that lived there who either were Roman or had adopted Roman culture that it was kind of considered a Roman town by that point. So, of course, we know the history of Romans in the UK, and they left completely around 400 CE. And it does seem like the Romans had enough influence over this town that when they sort of pulled out of the area, the city just kind of died out. And by the 1700s, there's like actual historical resources that show that it was known by the medieval residents of the area that there were ruins there and that they were the ruins of an ancient Roman town, but it had been abandoned. So that's kind of how we know that there's something there on the surface that has been known and people have known about it for a long time. It just was never in the way of modern progress. Yeah. So it stayed covered under the ground until now because now it is in the way.
I bet there has been lots of things. If this wasn't protected, I don't know, but I bet there's been lots of things that have just been dredged up by plows.
Yeah,
over
maybe.
the centuries. Yeah. How do we know that there was such a heavy Roman influence on this town? How do we?
Artifacts, of course. What else?
That's so lame.
I know. I wrote that exactly in our notes.
Yes.
And then you read it that same way.
Yeah.
You're such a dork. So the items that they found included Roman coins and also Roman deities on some of the items, like carved on them or impressed on them or however it was done, including like pottery and then also like metal weights for scales. So when you see the deities for a culture on something, you know that they really had a heavy influence in the area. And then in addition to that, they also had like Roman style brooches and traces of lead-based cosmetics that were known to be used by Romans, which just shows how far reaching, like the styles and everything of Rome itself to reach all the way up into the UK. And then you see it in the styles of the jewelry, the brooches, and also in the makeup and the cosmetics that they're wearing. So I thought that was pretty cool that they were able to identify those traces of that material.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It turns out they found a graveyard as well with cremated remains in Roman style urns. It's good things the Romans had a style.
I know.
Because it makes them really easy to identify.
Yeah, they really definitely got into this area and into this town and made their mark on it because there's Roman style everything everywhere that they're finding.
Yeah, one of the things that is distinctly Roman to me is that the layout of the town is Roman, and it's just if the Romans are known for anything, it's coming
It's
in.
that layout.
It's coming in with infrastructure.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Like everywhere they went, they just brought grids and square things to
Yeah,
them.
they did. Yeah.
That's why those round savages soon became square Romans. So
I mean, would we say soon? It took like,
I mean,
quite a few years, at least 500 years to make that happen.
we just talked about a 4,000-year-old game board, so I'm going to go ahead and say
true.
soon.
That's true. Yeah. That was a quick turnaround, I suppose.
Yep. They had a large 10-meter wide stone paved road right down the middle of town.
Yeah, apparently a road that large is kind of uncommon. So the archaeologists in charge of the dig they're saying that because it was such a large, wide road, it just shows how this town was really an outpost for trading. And it was a super important town as far as like moving goods and stuff like that. They needed this huge, large road in order to do that.
Yeah. There's also another distinctly Roman feature, which is there's a division between the residential district and the more industrial district where the workshops and bakeries and stuff like that were.
Yeah, totally. So you've got almost like a class distinction probably beginning when you see a division like that. Of course, the town, I think, kind of died out before it advanced along to a point where it was a big enough city where you could truly see class distinctions like that in the architecture, but it was definitely like heading that direction. So,
All right.
Do you know why Rome ended up pulling out of the UK and so abruptly too? Because I think they kind of like abandoned ship basically, but I don't really know the reasons behind it.
Honestly, I don't know, but I mean, I do know that, I mean, the people, the like Anglo-Saxon people of that area were, pretty strong-willed, and maybe they just resisted Roman influence.
Not into it.
Maybe there was, I mean, I'm not a Roman scholar, but maybe there could have been a number of reasons, like, it was just too hard and too far away from Rome.
Yeah.
And maybe there was clearly growing instability in Rome.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Rome is starting to fracture at that point. So
maybe they just had to pull back and stabilize the empire. So
yeah, but it is interesting that you can see a town that's like flourishing, right? And then all of a sudden the Romans start backing away and the town just kind of dies out after that. It makes you wonder, like, did all the people go back to Rome? And that's why? Did they disperse from that town and go to other towns in the area? Or were they there for a little while and it just couldn't maintain without the influence and help from Rome? I wonder what causes it to die out, because that's always a big conversation in archaeology, is when you talk about a city or a society that collapses, you don't want to indicate that all of a sudden they were just poof gone.
Right.
But something happened to these people, and I just would be very curious to find out what, because it just seemed to end pretty abruptly.
I don't know, but that's pretty much the end of this segment. So let's take off and see if we can't find any Romans in Peru when we go talk about Machu Picchu. I don't think we're going to find any.
No.
Maybe some ancient board games, but
No. Maybe some Spaniards invading.
All right. And on that great disappointment, let's end this segment.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop the latest school styles with an extra 25% off during Tanger Style, our biggest sale of the season, now through August 25th. Plan your trip at tanger.com.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 156. And as promised, we are in Peru, Machu Picchu. And I don't know of too many people that wouldn't immediately have the image of the town, I guess, of Machu Picchu.
Sure,
Fortress,
like that. Yeah, like
whatever it is.
That image of terracing all across the mountains. It's very distinctive.
With the mountain peaks in the background, like of the area where it's at. You never see it in the other direction. Like this is the photo that you see.
Yeah. And
that's in the NBC News article that we linked to here first, but we've also got a Science Direct article that directly mentions this stuff, the actual source material. But the popular article was written by NBC News, and it's called Ancient and Hidden, Machu Picchu's Complexity Uncovered by Archaeologists. Now, that's a little bit
misleading.
A little bit much. Like, it's pretty complex, and we knew that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Before we talk about this article, though, why don't you talk about going to Machu Picchu? Because you've been there.
I have. I went there in... 2003. Probably 2003. So, oh my God, I can't believe it's been almost 20 years. Is that not crazy?
Old lady.
I know. So So I was in college and I did my field school in Peru, which I think I've talked about before. And a couple of us decided to add on a trip at the end to go to Machu Picchu. And it was such an amazing experience. And just a little bit of context, like geographically speaking, of where you're going and what you're doing. But you go to this town called Cusco, which is high up in the mountains. I didn't look up the elevation or anything, but you're talking like probably 8,000 feet or something like that, just at Cusco. And the best way to do it is to go to Cusco. It's a really cool, really old ancient city, but it still is occupied. It's still a modern, well, not modern, but it's a town that you can go and stay in. And just, you have to acclimatize yourself to that elevation because it is so high up there. And then you go to Machu Picchu, which is another like 2,000 or 3,000 feet up. So it's this like crazy elevation experience, and just be prepared for altitude sickness to potentially be a problem for you. A lot of people I was with experienced that. I did not, but I don't normally have an issue with that, so that wasn't surprising. But it was just such a cool experience. And Cusco, the town itself, we won't go into that too much, but it's an amazing place. It's like a Spanish town that was built on top of ancient Incan remains, basically. Nice. So you've got this fusion of the different architecture types. And then from there, you take a train to get up to Machu Picchu. And it's not a short train ride. It was a pretty long train ride, if I remember, a couple hours, I think. And then you get there and you're at the bottom of this mountain and you take these buses or vans or something to get up to the actual entrance. And you're just climbing and climbing and climbing in elevation the whole way. And then you finally get up there, and like to walk around and see Machu Picchu, you have to like hike straight up and straight down and straight up and straight down. But oh my gosh, it was such an experience, and it's so like just embedded in my brain at this point. So it was such a cool experience, and I highly recommend it to anybody who has the opportunity to go visit, for sure.
Yeah, Machu Picchu itself is at 7,972 feet. And it's got an area of 125.8 square miles.
Is it really only at 8,000 feet?
It is.
Man, I remember it being so much higher than that, but it was also 20 years ago, so don't judge me too hard.
Yeah, I was just looking up the Wikipedia page, actually.
Yeah.
So, and there's a phone number listed, which is weird. Yeah.
Well, there's like a building and everything there.
I want to call Machu Picchu. Like, where does that number go? Does somebody answer the phone and just go,
there's a building and a museum and all of that stuff. So, oh man.
But yeah, so Machu Picchu was basically at in its heyday in like the 15th century, and to be honest, doesn't seem to have been, I don't know if inhabited is the right word, but populated or inhabited for very long. To be honest, I mean,
it wasn't. Yeah,
it was quite the effort to build, and my guess is, to be honest, I would assume, and I don't know for sure, but I would assume that it was just hard to sustain and maintain.
Well, I think so, yeah. And they did such a brilliant job with all the terracing, as you can still see it today. But there's also like reports of that terracing going very, very badly, and there being landslides and erosion issues and stuff like that.
Sure,
like it's a great place, but it was not as sustainable as I think that the Incans were hoping it would be at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And just really quick, I had to figure out where my elevations got crisscrossed. Cusco is at 11,200 feet.
Geez.
So I had them backwards. Down. Yeah, so you go all the way up to Cusco and then you go down to Machu Picchu. So there's where I got my elevations crisscrossed.
I've been in some high elevations, but I don't think I've ever been to a town that was that high.
It was crazy. You do feel like you can't quite get a full breath when you're breathing there.
Yeah.
Even if you're in perfect physical condition, it's just like you can't quite do it. So anyway, I had to clear that up.
I stuck my head out of an airplane window at 11,000 feet, but aside from that,
I don't think you should do that.
Yeah,
no, that wouldn't be a good idea.
We had to go that high up when in flight training, just to experience it a little bit. The instructor had oxygen on, and I did not.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
So you gotta understand the warning signs of hypoxia, basically.
Oh, okay, sure.
But yeah, I was in North Dakota and it was hot as balls out. Even 11,000 feet, it was still pretty warm out at 11,000 feet. So you can open the window of a little Cessna, and that was pretty much the limit of that plane too.
Yeah, isn't it amazing to think that there's mountains at that exact same height?
I know, we were so high.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. So,
but yeah.
So what was found was actually not in Machu Picchu proper. It's really more the Machu Picchu metropolitan area, so to speak. It was a series of structures that were found, and it says among the sprawling ruins, but they really mean sprawling because on the outskirts of Machu Picchu is a ceremonial site called Chachamba. I don't know if Chachamba is right, but Chachamba.
Yeah. And I remember this from when I was there. There's like a hike that you can take to like almost the next peak over, and it takes you to probably Chachamba, although like you said, there's sprawling ruins everywhere. So, you know, there's paths that you can take from Machu Picchu proper to go to all of these different places. So that one might be different from the one that I'm remembering. But anyway, yes, they're everywhere.
This was just under 5 miles away. So, I mean, in my mind, that's a day's journey with these elevations and stuff like that. You know, it's probably not too easy to hike that. And they used LIDAR, which we've talked about on this show probably and on the Archaeotech podcast, but that is an acronym which means light detection and ranging, basically lasers, to be honest, using lasers to look through vegetation and map the contours of the ground. So in simple terms, what LIDAR does is it pulses really quickly, and they use different passes with different angles and things like that. And these lasers have the ability to basically shoot through vegetation, and sometimes it's not even through vegetation, it's just lasers, so they can hit through all the tiny little cracks and crevices, and vegetation is not one of the things that really bounces back on or gets a reading on. And often the ground will either directly reveal structures, especially if you're in like a jungle environment, that are not underground but just covered in vegetation. Or it'll show mounds and, you know, roads and things like that are just deformations and clearly man-made depressions in the ground. Yeah,
I guess anything that has an angle to it or is...
Yeah, it just doesn't look natural.
Yeah, you can just tell when something... you can tell when something doesn't look natural, and of course you need to go ground truth it and make sure that the thing that you think is not natural really isn't natural. And it sounds like that's what they did in this case, is that they had things that were like, that does not look like it is a natural part of the environment. And of course it wasn't when they went to actually look.
Well, they found several structures that were, I mean, right in the jungle outside of some these well-known structures in Chachamba, and they're like, holy crap, this stuff's like right over there, but it's in deep jungle.
Yeah. Like they've got like a small area cleared out around the site that they know, and then like beyond that, it's just like a wall of jungle, but there was stuff right there that they didn't even know.
Had no idea.
That sounds like Peru, yeah.
I feel like that describes all of Peru.
Oh, no,
like
not
there's stuff everywhere.
I know you think that, but like the North Coast is a desert. The North Coast looks like this.
Yeah.
We're in a desert right now, so it looks like that. But all
the jungly parts, maybe.
Yes, all the jungly parts. And this is definitely a jungly part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. They also found parts of a water system that ran through the area, which I would expect there to be one there. And that makes sense. Although I would wonder if it's new parts to a new water system, or why somebody hasn't taken the existing parts of water system they know are there and just kind of traced where they could go. Yeah, because water, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that water is going to follow a pretty easy path. And the simplest path you can give water to go is the way you're going to go, right? And sometimes you've got to make a more circuitous route, but just because of logistics. But anybody can kind of figure that out if they need to. So,
but there's so much water in this area too that they could have just been creating a system from the nearest water source, a spring or stream or whatever it was, to bring it over to the structure. So it could have been a totally independent structure that there was nothing more of it to follow, you know?
Yeah. The main site of Chachamba is actually a stone altar that's kind of in the middle, surrounded by 14 baths. And the thought in one of the articles I read was that, again, back in the 15th century, if you're on your way to Machu Picchu, you stopped at Chachamba for a spiritual bath in order to be clean and pure on the way up to Machu Picchu. So
yeah, that makes sense. I wonder if they thought there was something special about the water in the area, or like what kind of ritual would have been involved in that. And since it's so close to like contact with Europeans, it makes me wonder if there are some like written accounts of how this whole thing worked. Of course, they'd be biased, obviously, because they're not in Incan language, but you know, it still does make me curious about like it. I'm just wondering about what kind of firsthand accounts. Yeah, that might be out there about how what the right way to go about visiting Machu Picchu was, and what you were doing when you did go there.
Yeah, because there were people, Spanish people. I mean, probably at least partially during the time of, right after Machu Picchu was really in its fluorescence. So there could have been firsthand accounts that were written down. That would be interesting to find. There could have been accounts that were written down of this crazy high city in the mountains in the jungle, from people who actually had gone there when they were younger. So,
well, yeah, and that's why Cusco has such interesting architecture, is because there was an Incan town there, and it was an area that was conquered by the Spanish, and they basically just plopped Spanish-style architecture on top of the Incan structures that were there. So you get there's like a church that like the foundation of it is all Incan, and then above that they built their Spanish-style church on top of it. Yeah. And you see that kind of like fusion of architecture all throughout the town, where they basically just took over, but they're like, oh, cool, this has good bones. Let's just use that and build right on top of it.
Yep. So
it's really an interesting area where that contact point between the Spanish and the Incans, it was just a totally different thing than it was between like Native Americans in North America and the different people, Europeans, that they interacted with. I feel like it was a totally different interaction because the people in the two places were totally different. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Cool. All right. Well, that's about it for that. So thanks for listening to this episode. Check out all the links in the show notes. And again, if you're listening to this, and I know if you're listening to this way into the future, we will no longer have our link that you can click on. However, it's still probably a good service. I'm sure if you're listening to this way into the deep future, and we're all dead, I'm sure that the company of Zencastr is still existing. So please go check them out. Click on the link in our show notes, or you can go to Zencastr. That's zencastr.com. No E at the end there. It's tr.com. And go to pricing, and then if you use code TAS for the Archaeology Show, just TAS, you can get 30% off your first 3 months. And they've got some pretty good deals.
Yeah, and you can actually sign up for an account for free just to like try it out and see what it is. So you don't have to be obligated to buy anything right away. But if you're thinking about starting a podcast and you have anything to do with people that aren't in the same place, which don't we all now, given COVID and pandemic restrictions and all that, it's a really great way to have a conversation with somebody and record it.
Well, and honestly, even if you're doing a solo show, it's actually a pretty good deal to just record that locally on Zencastr. And the reason I'm saying that is, and to be honest, Rachel and I should do that, but since we're in the same room, we don't. But when you record on Zencastr, as of, I think, December or November of 2021, they now have automatic transcription.
Oh, yeah, that's really great
so
for accessibility.
Transcription is expensive.
Yeah.
Now, automatic transcription is never like super great, but it's not bad.
No, it's good enough.
Yeah. I've seen it, and it's not bad. Yeah. So, and I've been really bad about including the transcription in most of our episodes that actually record with Zencastr, but I need to get better at doing that. So anyway.
Resolution for 2022.
I hate resolutions.
So much to do.
Incidentally, asking for a friend, do we have any volunteers out there that want to help us post podcasts and bring in the transcriptions? Because that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a trivial thing, but when you're doing 7,000 things related to these podcasts, giving somebody one thing just is a huge weight off your shoulders.
Very true.
Anyway, thanks for listening, and we will be back next time, and we are going to be recording and, well, at least posting the next episode using Starlink Internet.
Oh my God, you're so excited.
I'm so excited. More to come on the Archaeotech podcast.
Wait, we're doing that with Starlink right now too, technically.
Technically, but
it's just
not
we
ours.
don't own this Starlink.
That's true.
We're borrowing from a friend.
I don't count it. Yeah. All right, see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.archpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArchPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. And was edited by Chris Webster and Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop the latest school styles with an extra 25% off during Tanger Style, our biggest sale of the season, now through August 25th. Plan your trip at tanger.com.